Every structure on this list was built by people whose knowledge did not survive them, not stolen, not suppressed, simply gone. The buildings outlasted the understanding that built them. That is the real mystery, not the stones themselves, but the silence around them. No manuals, no descendant tradition, no culture that says, we learned this from the people who built that. In each of these 7 cases, the civilization that produced the structure either disappeared completely, collapsed abruptly, or left behind no record of how they did what they demonstrably did. What we have instead are the structures themselves, measured by engineers, studied in peer-reviewed journals, documented in archaeological reports that ask the same question every time: how did they know this? Today we look at 7 ancient structures built with knowledge that disappeared. All 7 are real. All 7 have been examined by specialists who left with more questions than they arrived with. None of them require an alternative explanation. They require honesty about the size of what we have lost. Before Stonehenge, before the pyramids, before the first Mesopotamian city-state, on a small island in the Mediterranean, someone built the oldest freestanding stone structures on Earth. The Ġgantija Temples on the island of Gozo in Malta date to approximately 3600 BC, making them over 1,000 years older than Stonehenge and 5 centuries older than the Great Pyramid. The name comes from the Maltese word for giant. The people who named them could not believe human hands had built them. The limestone blocks used in the outer walls weigh up to 5 tons each. The builders had no metal tools, no wheeled vehicles, and, on an island, extremely limited timber. UNESCO archaeologist David Trump, who spent decades studying Malta's prehistoric sites, documented the construction as requiring sustained, organized labor across multiple generations. The architectural plan is deliberate. 2 interconnected apses forming a cloverleaf layout, with a central corridor aligned to specific solar events. Here is what makes Ġgantija different from every other ancient monument on this list. The culture that built it left no descendants. Around 2500 BC, approximately 1,000 years after the temples were completed, Malta's entire prehistoric population vanished from the archaeological record. No invasion is documented. No disaster layer has been found. The people simply stopped appearing. A completely different population arrived shortly afterward, with no apparent connection to what had come before. Genetic studies published in the journal Nature in 2020 confirmed that the temple builders share no significant DNA continuity with later Maltese populations. The knowledge of how to build Ġgantija did not pass to anyone. The last person who understood it died, and no one who came after them knew what they had inherited. The temples are still standing. The people are gone as if they were never there. But Malta is not an isolated case. 4 centuries later, on the other side of Europe, a completely different civilization was doing something equally precise, and they built something that still performs its intended function today, without a single repair, after 5,200 years. 300 kilometers of ocean away, and 4 centuries later, someone on the other side of Europe was doing something equally precise and building something that still works today. In County Meath in Ireland, a mound sits in a field, roughly circular, 85 meters in diameter, 13 meters tall. It was built around 3200 BC, older than Stonehenge by 1,000 years. A 19-meter passage leads from the entrance to a cross-shaped inner chamber. The core-belt stone roof, constructed from overlapping slabs, has kept the interior completely dry for 5,200 years of Irish rainfall and frost. No repairs have been made, no maintenance has been performed. The engineering still holds. On December 21st, the winter solstice, a shaft of sunlight enters through a small rectangular opening above the main entrance, called the roof box. It travels the full 19 meters of the passage and illuminates the floor of the inner chamber. Archaeologist Michael O'Kelly documented this in 1967, the first time it had been officially recorded, though local folklore had described it for centuries. The alignment is accurate to within minutes of arc. To achieve it, the builders had to know the precise angle of the winter solstice sunrise as seen from that exact location, which requires years of systematic astronomical observation recorded with enough accuracy to execute in stone. They built an 85-meter mound, positioned a 19-meter passage, and cut a separate roof box above the entrance, all to capture 17 minutes of light on one specific morning each year. The stones in the passage include orthognis, slabs, quarried from outcrops up to 80 kilometers away. No record survives of how they were moved. The tradition of astronomical knowledge that produced the alignment died with the people who held it. Every December 21st, the light still arrives exactly as they intended. Newgrange left us a monument we can see, enter, and measure. The next case left us 30,000 square meters of carved underground space and nothing else. No name, no date, no record of any kind, not even in a civilization that recorded almost everything. In 1992, a farmer named Wu Anai in Zhejiang province pumped out a pond that sat on his land. After 17 days, the water dropped enough to reveal an entrance in the stone below. He climbed inside and found a carved chamber, then another, and another. By the time the drainage was complete, 24 chambers had been found, approximately 30,000 square meters of underground space, carved from solid sandstone. Each chamber has stone pillars left standing to support the roof. The ceilings reach several meters high, and across every surface, every wall, ceiling, pillar, and floor the same pattern. Parallel chisel marks, evenly spaced, running at a consistent angle of precisely 60 degrees. Everywhere, the same angle, without deviation, across 30,000 square meters, in the dark. 3D scanning conducted by researchers from the Chinese Academy of Sciences confirmed the consistency of the pattern. The angular deviation across all surfaces is minimal enough to suggest either a template or a specialized tool was used to maintain the angle throughout construction. But no such tool has been found. No tools of any kind were found. No pottery, no human remains, no artifacts. An estimated 1 million cubic meters of rock was removed to create these chambers. There is no spoil heap. There is no record anywhere in Chinese historical documentation, which is among the most comprehensive in the ancient world, of who built the Longyu caves, when, or why. They do not appear in any text. The official status of the Longyu caves, as of the most recent published research, origin unknown. The knowledge didn't disappear here. It left no trace of ever having existed. At least in China, the caves are underground hidden. The next case is impossible to hide. It sits on a hill above a major city, in full view, and has been in full view for 6 centuries. And in 6 centuries, no one has been able to explain how the joints were made. 3 kilometers north of Cusco, on a hill above the city, the Inca built a wall that experimental archaeologist Jean-Pierre Protzen of UC Berkeley spent years trying to understand and documented in a 1993 paper that remains one of the most honest accounts in the literature. He could replicate the technique at small scale. He could not explain the scale itself. The wall is built from irregular polygonal limestone blocks, each one a different many-sided shape. They fit together in a 3-dimensional jigsaw with no 2 joints alike. The largest block weighs an estimated 128 tons. Many others are in the 80 to 100 ton range. The Inca had no iron tools, no wheels, and no draft animals capable of pulling that weight. At any joint between 2 of these irregular blocks, a piece of paper cannot be inserted. Standard office paper is 0.05 to 0.1 millimeters thick. The gap in many places is smaller than that. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, the chronicler Pedro de Cieza de Leon wrote that their stonemasons inspected Sacsayhuaman and could not account for it. Professional builders, looking at work they could not reproduce. Cieza de Leon's account is not legend, it is a primary historical document. The Inca technique of stone fitting survived in oral tradition and in the hands of skilled craftsmen for generations. But the ability to move 128-ton irregular blocks and fit them to sub-millimeter precision using only the tools the Inca possessed, that specific capability has never been reconstructed. The knowledge of how to do it at that scale died with the people who held it. The paper still won't fit between the stones. Every structure so far was built on land. The next one wasn't. It was built on the ocean itself, and the question of how they moved, what they moved across open water, has defeated every experimental reconstruction that has tried to answer it. Off the coast of Pohnpei in the Pacific, there is a city built on the ocean, not near the ocean on it. Madol, consists of 92 artificial islands in a tidal lagoon, constructed from basalt columns stacked in an interlocking pattern. Individual pieces weigh up to 50 tons. The total volume of basalt used is estimated at 750,000 metric tons. The nearest source of this specific basalt is on the opposite side of Pohnpei, separated from the construction site by open water. Smithsonian archaeologist Rufino Mauricio, who conducted extensive fieldwork at Madol, documented the transport problem in detail. There is no viable overland route, the basalt had to cross open ocean, and no experimental reconstruction using period-appropriate methods has successfully moved pieces of this size by water. The largest walls stand 7.5 meters above the lagoon. The Sodeleur dynasty ruled from Madol for roughly 500 years and left no written record of construction methods. The oral traditions of Pohnpei say two brothers with supernatural powers flew the stones into place. That is the only account that exists. In 2016, UNESCO added Madol to the World Heritage in Danger list not because of human interference, but because the artificial islands are subsiding. The structures are deteriorating faster than they can be studied. The city is returning to the water it was built on, and everything that could have told us how it was made is going with it. Every case so far sits above the waterline. You can visit them, photograph them, stand next to them. The next one is 25 meters underwater, and if the evidence is right, it was built before the ocean covered it, which makes it the oldest structure on this list by at least 6,000 years. If the history they taught you feels like it skipped several chapters, it did. Subscribe to Sapiens Occulta. We follow the evidence wherever it leads, however uncomfortable the destination. Why do you think none of these builders left instructions? Leave your answer below. In 1986, a diving instructor named Kihachiro Aratake was exploring the waters of Yonaguni, Japan's westernmost island, when he found something on the seafloor that he could not explain. Terraced platforms, right angles, what appeared to be a road, stone pillars, a structure descending in steps to a depth of 25 meters, covering an area of approximately 150 by 40 meters. The question of whether the Yonaguni monument is natural or man-made has been argued in peer-reviewed literature for over 2 decades. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus, who conducted more than 100 dives on the site, published papers arguing for human construction, citing what he identifies as tool marks, drainage channels, and carved steps too regular to be natural erosion. Geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University, who also dove the site, has argued the features are consistent with natural sandstone fracturing along fault lines. The debate is unresolved in one sense, but the weight of physical evidence is harder to dismiss than Schoch's argument allows. Natural sandstone fracturing along fault lines does not produce drainage channels. It does not produce what Kimura identified as a stone pillar that had been removed from its original position and relocated. It does not produce the consistent angular geometry visible across the entire site. The features that define Yonaguni, the terracing, the channels, the right angles, are exactly the features that natural erosion cannot generate systematically across a 150 by 40 meter structure. The more uncomfortable question is not whether it is man-made. It is what it means if it is. Construction at that depth puts the date at approximately 10,000 BC. That is 5,000 years before the first known city. If Yonaguni is man-made, the timeline of human civilization does not need adjustment. It needs to be rewritten. The monument has been sitting at the bottom of the Pacific for at least 10,000 years. The debate above it is much younger. Yonaguni raises a question about timeline. How early did precision construction begin? The last case raises a different question. Not how early, but how completely knowledge can disappear. This one didn't sink underwater. It vanished in plain sight, at 3,800 meters above sea level, in the middle of a drought, and what it left behind still works. At 3,800 meters above sea level on the Bolivian Altiplano, a civilization built a hydraulic engineering system that modern engineers have spent decades trying to understand and have not yet fully replicated. The Acapana Pyramid at Tiwanaku is a 7-level step structure with an internal drainage system engineered to redirect water across every level in a specific sequence. Archaeologist John Janusek of Vanderbilt University, who excavated Acapana extensively, describe the system as functioning as a model of the Andean hydrological cycle. Water enters at the top, is channeled through internal stone conduits, emerges at each level, and is redirected in a pattern that mirrors how water moves through the Andean landscape. The engineering is precise enough that it still functions when it rains. What it was for ritual, agricultural, astronomical remains debated. How the conduits were designed and built at this precision, using only the tools available, has not been reproduced. The Gateway of the Sun, carved from a single 10-ton andesite block, frames an astronomical alignment. At the equinox, the rising sun passes directly through it. The calendar frieze carved above the gate depicts a solar cycle accurate to within minutes of the Gregorian calendar, which would not exist for another 1,000 years. Around 1000 AD, a catastrophic drought struck. Tiwanaku's raised field agricultural system, which had sustained tens of thousands of people on the Altiplano for centuries, failed. The city was abandoned within decades. When the Inca arrived centuries later, they found the buildings, the gateway, and the drainage system. They did not know how any of it worked. They said the gods had built it. The hydraulic system still functions when it rains. The engineers who designed it have been dead for 1,000 years, and no one since has built anything like it at altitude. 7 structures, 7 different civilizations, and the same problem, recurring each time. The knowledge did not survive. Not the buildings, the understanding. The buildings are still here. They are measured, catalogued, photographed, studied. What is missing is the mind behind them. The tradition that produced the Ġgantija alignment died on Malta when its people vanished. The astronomy that produced Newgrange's roof box was never written down. The technique that produced Sacsayhuaman's joints was never passed to anyone who could pass it further. This is the actual mystery. Not that ancient people were capable of extraordinary things, they were, repeatedly across every continent and every era. The mystery is that capability of this precision existed and then stopped. No gradual decline, no simplified successor tradition, just absence. The simplest explanation is also the most uncomfortable one. We are not the first civilization to develop sophisticated knowledge, and we may not be the last to lose it. The structures on this list are what survives when knowledge disappears faster than stone. They are monuments not to what was built, but to what was lost. Which of these 7 surprised you most? Tell us in the comments. And if you want to keep reading the pages that didn't make it into the textbook, you know where to find us.